This video is about your major city in the UK case study for paper 2, Urban Issues and Challenges, and our UK case study is Newcastle, located in the northeast of England, home to 1.2 million people. Newcastle has changed dramatically from its growth in the Industrial Revolution, where shipbuilding and mining were dominant. It's now the 8th most populous urban area in the UK and is home to 2 universities. We're going to look at the different opportunities and challenges, as well as the impact of migration, urban sprawl, and urban regeneration in this video. So first, let's have a look at the impact of migration. Now, we have both national migration and international migration. Now, national migration has placed a pressure on housing and employment, whereas international migration has brought diversity. The Chinese Arch was built in 2004, and in addition to this, BBC Radio Newcastle have a 50-minute Chinese language slot on a Sunday. And in addition to this, you have lots of Chinese supermarkets and Chinese restaurants, which have boosted the culture of Newcastle. Now, as we move on to look at the opportunities, remember it's a bit like the Rio question. You could get asked about the opportunities or the challenges or both. Firstly, we'll start off with the integrated transport systems. So there's all different forms of transport in Newcastle and they all link together. For example, the metro as seen in the picture links with the bus system and also links with the train system, which encourages the use of public transport, which is obviously an environmental opportunity. The next is urban greening. Now you can see urban greening on the side of M&S on Northumberland Street, but that's not only what urban greening is. It aims to increase biodiversity, and as we move along to have a look at the next image, it also creates more opportunities for walkers and pedestrians, and additional parkland for recreation, for sports such as football and rugby, and places in Newcastle such as Jesmond Dean. So urban greening is not just the greenery you see on the side of M&S, it's also those open green spaces that are in Newcastle, that are in the urban area. We then move on to have a look at employment. So this one can go as both. You could talk about employment. There's big companies in Newcastle, the Go Ahead Group, for example, employing huge numbers of people. But there's also lots of entertainment and recreation. There's the Great North Museum, Theatre Royal, the City Hall, which are popular places for performances. Newcastle is also steeped in history and culture, as well as having art galleries. Eldon Square is a popular facility for people to go shopping. Therefore, it doubles up as a recreation, but also job opportunities. Lastly, I'm going to talk about cultural mix. Newcastle has an increasingly diverse population. The Newcastle Mela, pictured here, happens every year and is a true display of diversity. We'll move on then to the challenges in Newcastle. Now, the first challenge I want to discuss is dereliction of land. Dereliction of land means areas in the city that are abandoned. Now, in Newcastle, there are 123 brownfield or derelict sites in Newcastle, so that means they're not being used. Wasteland and old factories look unattractive, which can ultimately discourage businesses from locating there and also discourage any further investment. So, urban dereliction is all about those areas being abandoned, the buildings still being there, but perhaps having broken windows or broken doors and having people squatting in those areas. The next challenge is urban decline and deprivation. So places suffering from urban deprivation have visible difference in housing, in economic opportunities, in education as well. And you do see that difference. People don't have equal access to the same facilities within Newcastle. In addition to this, health varies. The people in wealthy areas tend to live longer than those in poorer areas of Newcastle. There's actually a difference of around 12.6 years in life expectancy between Byker and Gosforth, and a lot of the health problems are a result of alcohol abuse and smoking. So to conclude, Newcastle is an incredibly unequal city. You have people who are very wealthy, and unfortunately people who are in poverty. So you have to bear that in mind when looking at the opportunities and challenges in Newcastle. Now we'll move on to have a little look at urban sprawl. Okay, so urban sprawl is that unplanned growth of urban areas into the surrounding countryside. Now, Newcastle Great Park is located in the north of Newcastle next to Gosforth, and the government gave special permission for this development to go ahead, despite it being built on greenbelt land. Now, what is Newcastle Great Park? Lots of housing. There's a school, nursery, a business park, community facilities, open space, play areas, and outdoor sports facilities. And there was many arguments for and against Newcastle Great Park going ahead. Now, originally 2,500 new homes were completed and a further 1,200 houses are to be built. There'll be 80 hectares of commercial development which could generate jobs, over 1,500 jobs. The income is being generated for developers, and there's been cycle routes in and around Newcastle Great Park. There's also to be a full time ranger to manage the country park to ensure local wildlife conservation. However, the properties are priced well above the average wage of people in Newcastle, making the majority of the houses unaffordable. Environmentalists are concerned about the impact upon red squirrel, who are an endangered species. The Newcastle Great Park housing plans contradict the principles of no development in greenbelt land, that greenbelt land should be protected from building upon. And there's also no guarantee of job creation. Yes, the developer will have built the houses, but the developer could have them members of staff with them all the time, not necessarily hiring new jobs within Newcastle for locals. And it's also prone for flooding. And over 8,000 people signed a petition against the extension of these homes. Now, another question you could get asked in relation to your UK city case study is about urban regeneration. So, we know that urban regeneration is all about upgrading an area, and in Newcastle, that was Granger Town. Now, 320 million of both public and private money was spent on this. The area is now used for street markets, there's high quality benches and bike lockups, they're bringing empty shops back to life, encouraging investment. And the reason they did this was because of vacant office space. Shops and offices moved out to other locations. There was investor confidence was quite low, and there was also competition from out of town shopping centres such as the Metro. Now, the good thing about this, the positives, were that 1,506 jobs were created, 286 new businesses were set up, 121 buildings were restored, and Gray's Monument was repaired and cleaned and restored back to its original state. However, with everything positive, unfortunately comes negative. The house prices have increased rapidly due to that regeneration, making it expensive for existing residents. A quarter of upper floor office space remained vacant after the regeneration, meaning that they didn't fill up all the office space that they upgraded. And greenfield development has allowed bigger office and retail space outside of town. So again, like Newcastle Great Park, so it's encouraged competition for Granger Town. Now, in summary, all of these things you need to know about Newcastle. Remember, opportunities and challenges is quite a common question. They could categorise them into social, economic, and environmental as well, but they could also focus in on specific aspects like urban dereliction or urban deprivation or even urban greening. Remember, your UK case study is Newcastle. Please don't write anything else. And that the difference between national and international, remember, I'm a national migrant. However, if I went to move to Australia tomorrow, I would be an international migrant.